Martin Luther King made this speech on the last night that he spoke. And for anybody that's followed him, you know that it seemed like he made a prophetic calling about his life. It was a mountaintop conversation. And I'm not making a mountaintop conversation because I think God still has some plans for me, but I want to read this to you because I think it's something to be said about it. Let us rise up tonight with a greater readiness. Let us stand with greater determination. Let us move on in these powerful days, these days of challenge to make America what it ought to be. We have an opportunity to make America a better nation, and I want to thank God once more for allowing me to be here with you. You know, several years ago, I was in New York City autographing the first book that I had written. And while sitting there autographing books, a demented black woman came up. The only question I heard from her was, "Are you Martin Luther King?" And I was looking down writing, and I said yes. And the next minute, I felt something beating on my chest. Before I knew it, I had been stabbed by this demented woman. I was rushed to the Harlem hospital. It was a dark Saturday afternoon, and that blade had gone through. And the x-rays revealed that the tip of the blade was on the edge of my aorta, the main artery. And once that punctured, you drown in your own blood. That's the end of you. It came out in New York Times the next morning that if I had sneezed, I would have died. Well, about 4 days later, they allowed me after the operation, after my chest had been opened and the blade had been taken out to move around in the wheelchair in the hospital. They allowed me to read some of the mail that came in from all over the states in the world. Kind letters came in, and I read a few, but one of them I will never forget. I had received one from President and the Vice President. I had forgotten what those telegrams said. I received a visit and a letter from the governor of New York, but I had forgotten that letter said. But there was another letter that came from a little girl, a young girl who was a student at White Plains High School. And I looked at that letter and I never forget it. It said simply, "Dear Dr. King, I am a ninth grade student at White Plains High School." She said, "Why it should not matter, I would like to mention that I am a white girl. I read in the paper of your misfortune and of your suffering. And I read that if you had sneezed, you would have died. And I simply write you to say that I'm happy that you didn't sneeze. And I want to say tonight, I want to say that I am happy that I did not sneeze, because if I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been around here in 1960 when the students all over the South started sitting at the lunch counters. I knew that as they were sitting in, they were really standing up for the best in America and taking the whole nation back to those great wells of democracy which were dug deep by the founding fathers in the Declaration of Independence and in the Constitution. And if I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been around in 1962 when Negroes in Albany, Georgia decided to straighten their backs. And whenever men and women straighten their backs up and they are going somewhere, because a man can't ride your back unless it's bent. And if I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been here in 1963 when the black people in Birmingham, Alabama rose to consciousness of this nation and brought into being the Civil Rights Bill. And if I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been here to have a chance later that year in August to try to tell America about the dream that I had. And if I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been down in Selma, Alabama, been in Memphis to see the community rally around those brothers and sisters who are suffering. I'm so happy that I did not sneeze. And they are telling me now that it doesn't matter now. It really doesn't matter what happens now. I left Atlanta this morning, and as I got started on the plane, there were 6 of us. The pilot said over the public address system, "We are sorry for the delay, but we have Dr. Martin Luther King on the plane, and to be sure that all of the baggage were checked, and to be sure that nothing would be wrong with the plane, we had to check out everything carefully. We had the plane protected and guarded all night." And then I got to Memphis, and some began to say that the threats, or talk about the threats that are out there, what would happen to me for some of our sick white brothers. What I don't know, what would happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead, but it doesn't matter with me, because I've been to the mountaintop, and I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place, but I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will, and He's allowed me to go to the mountain, and I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. And I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight.